This video was brought to you by the TLDR store. And if you want to have the entire TLDR team hand deliver your order anywhere in the world, then watch until the end of the video to find out how. When Rishi Sunak replaced Liz Truss as Prime Minister just a few weeks ago, the Conservatives were at least 30 points behind Labour in the polls. And Labour looked on track for a landslide majority in the next election. However, since Sunak's arrival in number 10, Labour's lead has narrowed somewhat, and polls suggest that Sunak has established a steady lead over Starmer on economic competence and as the best Prime Minister. So in this video, we're going to be taking a look at how Sunak is faring in the polls, what might happen next, and whether Sunak could actually win the Conservatives yet another term in office. So let's start by taking a look at the polling. As we mentioned in the intro, things didn't look good in the polls for Liz Truss. According to Redfield Wilton, by the end of her premiership, Labour had opened up a healthy 30-point lead in the polls, which would utterly wipe out the Tories at the next general election, with her personal approval rating looking even worse at -77, and just 6% of people approving of her job performance. And for context, that's actually lower than Vladimir Putin, who, according to latest YouGov polling, had a net approval rating of -73% among UK voters. Now, as you'd expect, Truss was significantly less popular than Keir Starmer. Just 8% of voters thought that Truss would be a better Prime Minister than Starmer. And as such, Starmer had healthy leads over Truss in basically every issue, including the economy. And in some sense, this was unsurprising, given Truss's brief but catastrophic economic record. But it was nonetheless pretty terrible news for the Tories, who usually poll better than Labour on issues like economics. Anyway, as you probably know, Truss was promptly replaced by Sunak, who came into office just a couple of weeks ago. Now, most analysts expected the Tories to see a poll bounce once Sunak came in, simply because Sunak is a lot more popular than Truss. However, so far the poll bounce has been relatively muted. Most poll aggregators still give Labour a 25-point lead over the Conservatives. Politico's poll of polls for the UK, for example, puts Labour on 51% and the Tories on 25%, as does the New Statesman's Britain Elects polling tracker. Now, if this were to translate to a general election, it would mean a massive landslide for Labour and a complete wipeout for the Conservatives. Britain Elects poll tracker, for example, predicts that Labour would win 503 MPs, while the Conservatives would get less than 10% of that, just 50. So it sounds like Sunak is doing pretty badly, right? Well, yes and no. Sure, the headline voting figure is still pretty terrible for the Conservatives, but the gap is closing, and Sunak's personal approval ratings are significantly better than his party's are. Polling from BMG published in late October found that while Labour holds strong leads over the Conservatives on basically every issue, Sunak in particular was trusted more than Starmer by 11 points on the economy, 9 points on tax, and 9 points on business. Sunak also had a slight lead over Starmer when it came to the best Prime Minister, which is quite remarkable considering that Truss was 50 points behind Starmer on best PM. Similarly, YouGov polling from Thursday found that Sunak had an 11-point lead over Starmer on managing the economy, although Starmer still had slight leads over Sunak on dealing with the cost of living and dealing with the cost of energy. Now, you might be thinking that all of this is a bit irrelevant. It doesn't matter whether or not people like Sunak personally. Headline voting intention is what decides an election, and the Conservatives are still miles behind. Now, in some sense, this is true, but history suggests that when it actually comes to election day, people often vote for who they think would make a better Prime Minister, and who they think is better on the economy. And that's exactly what happened in 2015. Labour led in the polls for months before the election, but the Conservatives were more trusted on the economy, and David Cameron had a steady lead over Ed Miliband as best Prime Minister. As the election approached then, the polls narrowed, and Cameron ended up winning a majority. You get the idea then. The polling here looks relatively similar to how it did in 2015, when the Conservatives ultimately ended up winning. So does this mean that Sunak could actually win the next election, whenever it ends up happening? Well, despite what happened in 2015, probably not. As things stand, Sunak is 25 points behind in the poll, whereas Cameron was only ever about 10 points behind. It's also worth saying that Cameron won the election by asserting his control over the party, which made voters think that they were mainly just voting for Cameron, not the Conservatives more generally. Today's Conservative Party, though, is more fractured and rebellious than it was in 2015, so it will be harder for Sunak to try and pull the same trick. And this is already becoming a problem for Sunak. In literally his first few days in office, he had to U-turn on a policy idea by Mel Stride, his new Work and Pension Secretary, who suggested that the UK cut maternity leave. Similarly, Suella Braverman has been talking a tough game on immigration, describing the number of people coming to the UK as, quote, an invasion. And it's not obvious that Sunak is on the same page, considering that he's just scrapped his pledge to get control of immigration via his 10-point plan proposed during his leadership campaign. But perhaps the main reason that Sunak looks unlikely to replicate Cameron's success is the economy. The UK is still yet to return to its pre-pandemic growth levels, and according to the Bank of England, we're looking at the longest recession since the 1930s. And previous forecasts regarding the UK's growth have been similarly bleak. The IMF's most recent forecast from October expects growth to fall by 0.3% in 2023, while the OECD's recent forecast from September is even more pessimistic, predicting zero growth in 2023. Now, incumbent governments rarely survive a deep depression, and on top of that, it looks like Sunak and his Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, are going to have to implement a whole load of unpopular spending cuts and tax rises in order to appease the bond markets, which reacted badly to Liz Truss's ill-fated mini-budget just a few weeks ago. Now, the specifics of this plan are set to be announced on November 17th as part of Hunt's fiscal statement. But it's already clear that these plans are not going to go down well with the public or the party. For example, the most recent report suggests that literally everyone in the UK will end up paying more tax under these plans, on top of further public spending cuts. And obviously, neither of these things are going to be popular at the best of times, but especially during a cost of living crisis. All in all, while Sunak has improved the Conservatives' chances, and there are some superficial similarities to 2015, the pre-existing polling deficit, combined with the miserable macroeconomic headwinds, mean that a Sunak victory in 2024 is still unlikely, which is why the bookies give Labour an 85% chance of winning the next election and a 42% chance of winning an outright majority. So Rishi Sunak probably isn't feeling great about his odds, but are you feeling lucky? And do you want to meet Team TLDR? Because we're currently approaching our 10,000th order on the TLDR store. So to celebrate, we're going to hand deliver the 10,000th order anywhere in the world. In fact, we're going to record a whole video of our team racing to deliver your order and be the first to arrive at your doorstep. Sounds fun, right? Well, I have some good news if you're considering placing an order to try and win, because we also have a huge sale on right now. All of our iconic pin badges are now half price, only $2.99. Or if you're feeling doubly lucky, you could get yourself a random pin for $1.79, 5 random pins for $5.99, or even 10 random pins for $9.99. And it's not just badges. Everything else in our store is also reduced, including our magnets and stickers. And just so you know, we have no plans on restocking any of these items. So once it's gone, it's likely gone forever. So if you've always wanted a little piece of TLDR, if you're looking for an early Christmas gift, or you just want to go for a drink with Team TLDR, then now is your chance to order. The link to the store is in the description, and thanks for supporting the channel.